In the early hours before dawn, when the sky is still the color of cold iron and the world feels suspended between night and morning, medieval England begins to star. A low mist clings to the earth. It seeps through narrow streets and coils around timber-framed houses that lean toward one another like aging conspirators. The silence is not peaceful. It is heavy, dense, alive with what lingers unseen. This is not the shining medieval world of tapestries and tournament fields. This is the lived-in world, the breathing world, the human world. And it smells of smoke, damp wool, and survival. Before the bells ring, before merchants shout their prices, before carts grind against stone, a quieter ritual unfolds inside cottages, castles, monasteries, and alleys alike. Cleanliness in the medieval world is not what we imagine. It is neither ignorance nor indifference. It is something more complicated, shaped by belief, fear, science as it was understood, and the limits of the age. Inside a peasant's cottage, the air bites with winter's chill. The walls are daub and timber. The floor is scattered with rushes and straw, not merely for comfort, but for absorption, for insulation, for necessity. A wooden basin sits near the hearth. Water, drawn yesterday from the well, now bears the faint cloudiness of the village's shared life. There is no plumbing, no heated tap, no porcelain sink. A man rises from his straw mattress. He rubs sleep from his eyes. He moves to the basin. He splashes the water onto his face. He gasps at the cold. This is washing. Not immersion, not luxury, but renewal enough to face the day. Medieval people did wash faces, hands, sometimes hair, especially before meals, especially before prayer. Clean hands were associated with spiritual purity as much as bodily health. But full bathing, full submersion, was another matter. Public bathhouses once thrived in earlier centuries, inherited from Roman traditions. In towns like London and York, bathhouses operated openly. Men and women attended, sometimes separately, sometimes not. Warm water, steam, conversation. But over time, attitudes shifted. The Black Death reshaped everything. When plague swept through Europe in the 14th century, killing perhaps a third to half of the population, explanations were desperately sought. Many believed disease traveled through corrupted air, miasma, through invisible poisons carried by foul smells. And warm water, it was thought, opened the pores. Open pores invited disease. Bathing, once associated with health, began to seem dangerous. Better, some physicians advised, to keep the pores closed. Better to avoid unnecessary immersion. Better to rely on linen. Linen was the quiet guardian of medieval hygiene. Under heavy wool garments, men and women wore linen shifts and shirts. Linen absorbed sweat. It could be boiled. It could be scrubbed against river stones. It was more easily cleaned than the outer garments that might be worn for months or even years. Among the wealthy, this practice became refined. In castles, beneath velvet and brocade, noblemen changed into fresh linen daily if possible. Not because they were pristine by modern standards, but because linen was believed to draw impurities away from the skin. A servant might warm cloths by the fire and bring them to the Lord's chamber. Hands, face, neck, wiped clean. A quiet ritual before court. In monasteries, routines were stricter. Monks washed before communal meals. They trimmed their tonsures. They followed regulated habits of modest cleanliness, not indulgent, but orderly. Water, after all, was sacred. But water was also scarce. In cities, waste and water intertwined dangerously. London in the 1300s was a city of perhaps 80,000 souls, a dense, crowded place of narrow lanes and open drains. Waste from homes was often thrown into the street, sometimes with warning cries of Gardes eau, beware the water. Rain might wash some of it away, but often it lingered. Chamber pots were emptied into gutters. Animal dung mixed with human refuse. Pigs roamed freely, consuming scraps. And beneath certain houses, especially larger ones, were cesspits, deep holes dug to collect waste. When those pits filled, someone had to empty them. They were called gong farmers. worked at night, by torchlight. They lowered buckets into thick, suffocating darkness and hauled the waste upward, carting it beyond city walls. It was dangerous work. Toxic fumes could overwhelm a man in minutes. Yet it was essential. Sanitation, crude as it was, required labor. Not ignorance, labor. Teeth, too, received attention. Toothbrushes did not exist in their modern form, but cloths were rubbed against enamel. Twigs were chewed into fibrous brushes. Powders made from salt or crushed herbs were applied. Among the wealthy, sugar, newly imported and expensive, began to rot teeth at alarming rates. Toothaches were common. Barber-surgeons handled extractions. Without anesthetic as we know it, pain was swift and unforgettable. But again, effort was made. Care was attempted. Understanding was limited, but concern was real. In noble households, perfumes masked odor. Herbs were strewn across floors. Lavender, mint, rosemary. These were not merely pleasant, they were protective. Fragrance was thought to repel disease carried by foul air. And smell, in medieval society, held moral meaning. Sweet scents suggested virtue. Foul odors implied corruption, even spiritually. The body was not separate from the soul. To cleanse one was to acknowledge the other. Religious belief shaped hygiene profoundly. Excessive bathing could be seen as vanity, but neglect was not holiness either. Balance was sought. And in rural villages, life was tied directly to land and season. Summer allowed more washing in rivers, winter restricted it. Clothing was layered not only for warmth but endurance. A wool cloak might endure decades, a leather shoe might be repaired repeatedly. To own few garments meant to care for them intensely. Water had to be carried, heated, protected from freezing. Every act of washing required effort, and effort cost energy. Energy required food. Food required labor. The chain of survival was unbroken. Disease, when it came, did not come because people were foolish. It came because microbes were unknown, because fleas carried plague, because sanitation systems were incomplete, because knowledge evolved slowly. Yet within that limited knowledge, medieval people adapted. They boiled what they could. They isolated the sick when they understood contagion was possible. They prayed. They worked. They endured. The image of the universally filthy Middle Ages oversimplifies a far more nuanced truth. Yes, streets could be foul. Yes, smells were strong. Yes, standards differed from ours profoundly. But medieval people were not strangers to discomfort. They felt grime. They felt sweat. They noticed decay. They sought relief where they could. A basin of water. A change of linen. A sprig of rosemary tucked into a sleeve. Small gestures against a vast and unforgiving world. Inside a castle chamber at dusk, candlelight flickers across stone walls. A noblewoman removes her outer gown. A maid brushes her hair slowly, methodically. A cloth warmed at the hearth presses gently against pale skin. Outside, the wind rattles shutters. Inside, ritual offers control. Across town, a laborer returns home caked in mud. His wife pours water sparingly over his hands before supper. Their children watch the steam rise in the cold air. Clean enough. Not perfect, but human. And in that humanity lies the truth of medieval hygiene. It was not the absence of care. It was care constrained by circumstance. Centuries later, running water would transform cities. Germ theory would revolutionize medicine. Soap would be industrialized. Plumbing would descend into every home. But the medieval world stood at a different threshold, balancing inherited Roman knowledge, religious doctrine, emerging medical theory, and daily survival. Their solutions were imperfect, yet they were thoughtful within their time. When we step back into that misty dawn, when we walk those narrow streets and enter those timbered homes, we must leave behind the arrogance of hindsight. Instead, we witness a society navigating the unseen with the tools it possessed.
Nothing but mist.
We see a man splash icy water onto his face before sunrise. We see a monk wash his hands in silence before breaking bread. We see a gong farmer risks his life so a city may function one more day. We see linen, simple, white, unassuming, serving as shield and sponge between body and world. The medieval age was not clean by modern measure, but it was not indifferent. It was a world of effort, of ritual, of adaptation, and above all, of resilience. As the sun finally rises over cathedral spires and the fog begins to thin, life resumes its noise. Merchants shout, hooves strike stone, smoke rises from hearths. The world turns. And beneath womb linen, beneath belief and limitation, medieval hearts beat with the same quiet desire we carry today. To endure. To protect. To cleanse what can be cleansed. And to face another uncertain day with whatever dignity is possible. In the end, perhaps that is the truest measure of hygiene. Not perfection, but persistence. And in that persistence, the medieval world was profoundly, unmistakably human.